Hello there, my name is Sofia Najaray Cosme Miranda from the Padre Rufo School, and today I present to you my video on the Count of Monte Cristo. Before we begin discussing the novel and its characters, it's best to talk about the author Alexandre Dumas. Alexandre Dumas was born in 1802, and he remains one of the most celebrated French authors. His work, especially The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers, have made him famous worldwide. Dumas has a passion for adventure and history, and these are reflected in his writing. Father, Thomas Alexandre Dumas, had an extraordinary life. As a general in revolutionary France and the son of a Haitian slave, he faced racial prejudice. Despite this, he rose up the ranks and quickly became one of their most important soldiers. At the time, he was a soldier next to Napoleon Bonaparte, who, in fear of losing to his competition, Thomas Alexandre, betrayed and abandoned him, leaving him to die in prison. Alexandre Dumas drew from his father's life for themes of betrayal, social justice, and resilience for his novels, including The Count of Monte Cristo. The story takes place during a turbulent period in French history, beginning in 1815, right after Napoleon's downfall, and during the Bourbon Restoration. Dumas uses this era of political tension to create a dramatic backdrop where shifting loyalties and schemes of betrayal were not just common but almost expected. The Count of Monte Cristo wasn't just a book for Dumas. It was a revenge fantasy he wrote on behalf of his father, a black general who fought in the French Revolution and was ultimately betrayed by Napoleon. Now that we have some background information on the author, we can now get into the characters of one of his most famous works, The Count of Monte Cristo. Edmond Dante, also known as the Count of Monte Cristo, or through his other aliases, Sinbad the Sailor, Busoni, and Lord Wilmer, is the protagonist of the novel. At the age of 19, he is falsely imprisoned for a crime which he did not commit and is kept in the horrible dungeon of the Chateau d'If, where he undergoes unbelievable hardships and sufferings. While in prison, Dante hears a fellow prisoner digging a tunnel, and so he too begins digging. When the two men finally meet, the other prisoner turns out to be a learned priest who teaches Dante many languages, sciences, history, and other subjects. They become as father and son, and when the priest is about to die, he reveals to Dante the hiding place of a long secret buried treasure consisting of untold wealth and gold coins, diamonds, and other precious jewels. After 14 years of bitter imprisonment and hardships, and a very daring and miraculous escape, Dante is able to discover the buried treasure on the island of Monte Cristo, and so he buys the island. He becomes the Count of Monte Cristo and dedicates himself to becoming God's avenging angel. The rest of his life is spent at first performing acts of goodness and charity for the good people whom he has known. Then he devotes his life to bringing about God's retribution against the evil people who were responsible for his imprisonment. Monsieur Danglars was the accountant for the ship the Pharaon, of which Dante was first mate of. When we first meet this man, we are immediately made aware that he has a jealous hatred for Edmond Dante, as he is about to be appointed captain at such a young age, a position which Danglars wanted. Danglars is the one who conceives the conspiracy against Dante, and is responsible for writing the anonymous note which sends him to prison for 14 years. The note and the handwriting are permanently engraved in Dante's eyes, and years later he is able to confirm Danglars' evil duplicity by another sample of his handwriting, in addition to the somewhat reliable testimony which Caderousse tells Abbe Busoni, an alias for the Count of Monte Cristo. By various illegal means, Danglars first integrates himself into the family of a prominent banker, later marries the banker's widow, and by using illegal banking methods, he quickly becomes an extremely wealthy man. Fernand Mondego, later known as the Count de Morcerf, was a simple fisherman and a sometime smuggler who was in love with the woman whom Edmond Dante was engaged to, Mercedes Herrera. Because Mercedes loved Fernand as a brother, Dante trusted him. However, it is Fernand who mailed the letter condemning Edmond Dante, hoping all the while that if Dante was arrested, he would then be able to marry Mercedes. By evil means, he was able to use his smuggling skills and his treachery in warfare to eventually be made a count and awarded an immense sum of money. Sometime during his rise of power, he married Mercedes, who had waited a long time for Dante, but finally abandoned hope. Ferdinand gained most of his wealth by betraying a high authority named Ali Pasha, whose daughter he sold into slavery and who is now a paramour for the Count of Monte Cristo. Gaspard Cadejus was a tailor and one of the original conspirators who falsified facts in a letter and thereby framed Edmond Dante. He never came to Dante's aid when he was in prison, and later the Count of Monte Cristo comes to him disguised as the Abbé Busoni, and learns about the entire nature of Cadejus's conspiracy against Dante, as well as Cadejus's rampant duplicity. Busoni rewards Cadejus for his narration, hoping that Cadejus will become an honest man. This, however, isn't the case, as we'll see later. Gerard de Villefort was described in the novel as the type of person who would sacrifice anything to his ambition, even his own father. And throughout the novel, whenever political expediency demanded it, he denied his own father, who was a Bonapartist and therefore opposed to the ruling royalty. When it was discovered that Edmond Dante had a letter from the island of Elba, where Napoleon was confined, to be delivered to Villefort's father, Villefort, in order to protect his own interests, had Dante imprisoned in the fortress of the Château d'If, from which there was no escape. In addition, Villefort closed his ears to the entreaties of the elder Dante, as well as Monsieur Morel, who tried on several occasions to plead for Dante's release. Because of his political ambitions, Villefort was willing to have an innocent man imprisoned for life. Thus he became the central enemy against whom the Count of Monte Cristo effected revenge. During Dante's 14 years of imprisonment, Villefort used all sorts of conniving means to achieve the powerful post of Deputy Minister of France. He became the most powerful law enforcement man in the nation. He also made a politically advantageous marriage to the daughter of the Marquis and Marquise de Saint-Méran, and had one daughter, Valentine, by that marriage. He later takes a second wife and has a son, Edward, by her. He also had an affair with a woman who becomes the Baroness Danglars, and Villefort used his wife's family mansion to conceal his mistress while she was pregnant. When the child was born, Villefort announced that the child was stillborn and takes the child in a box to the garden, where he planned to bury him alive. As we can see here, there were 4 men responsible for Dante's 14-year imprisonment in the Château d'If. Monsieur Danglars and Fernand were both jealous of Dante and forged a letter that was sent to Monsieur Villefort that eventually led to his imprisonment. Cadejus helped falsify facts for the note and kept quiet while he knew that Dante was an innocent man. And Monsieur Villefort, who knew Dante was innocent, still sent him to prison to protect his own interests. Louis Dante was Edmond Dante's old father, for whom he had a deep devotion, so deep in fact that part of the revenge which he took against his enemies was due to the fact that their treatment of his father caused him to die of starvation. Likewise, those people, like Monsieur Morel, who treated Dante's father kindly when he was in despair, came into good graces of Monte Cristo and are rewarded by him. Monsieur Morel was a shipbuilder and a shipowner. He was a kind man, interested only in doing good for others and his family. At the beginning of the novel, when the captain of one of his ships dies, Monsieur Morel was so impressed with the way the young 19-year-old Edmond Dante took over the captainship of the Pharaon that he made him captain of the ship. This act causes the antagonism of others. Likewise, when Dante was in prison, Monsieur Morel risked his reputation by continually applying for Dante's release, even though politically it was an extremely dangerous thing to do. When he learns of the death of Edmond Dante's father, he also arranges for the proper ceremonies. Julie Morel was the daughter of Monsieur Morel, who first meets the Count of Monte Cristo when he comes over to give Monsieur Morel money in order to save his business and avoid him getting bankrupt. William Morel was the son of Monsieur Morel, who later became not merely a close young friend of the Count of Monte Cristo, but because of his nobility of soul and his devotion and loyalty, he became the Count of Monte Cristo's spiritual son, and the recipient of a great deal of the Count's fortune. Thus, virtue is highly rewarded. Mercedes Herrera, later known as the Countess de Morcerf, was the victim of many of the past events. She loved only Edmond Dante, and when he seemingly disappeared forever in the Chateau d'If, she attempted to care for his father. When the elderly Dante died, she had no place to go, and so she succumbed to the pressure and married Fernand. As the Countess de Morcerf, she became an educated and distinguished but unhappy woman. She was the only person who knew that the Count of Monte Cristo was really Edmond Dante, as she recognized him right away. Albert de Morcerf was the son of Fernand and Mercedes de Morcerf. When he was visiting Rome, he happened to be staying in the same hotel where the Count of Monte Cristo was staying. They became close acquaintances, and when Albert was kidnapped by a gang of bandits, whose chief was Luigi Vampa, a man deeply indebted to the Count of Monte Cristo, the Count was able to rescue Albert before the bandits put him to death. Thus young Albert was indebted to Monte Cristo forever for saving his life. Because of Albert's obligation to him, the Count was later able to be introduced to all of his enemies in Paris, including Albert's father, Count de Morcerf, aka Fernand, who betrayed Dante many years ago. Albert, however, apparently inherited all of his mother's goodness and none of his father's treachery. Eventually, Albert wins the love and respect of the Count of Monte Cristo, and even though the Count is on the verge of killing Albert in a duel after he is challenged and insulted by Albert, the Count's willingness to recognize Albert's goodness is another example of an exception to his belief in the sons of the father rightly inheriting their father's guilt. Danglars was the wife of Danglars, but they have lived separate lives for over 7 years, and both had their own separate lovers. At present, her lover is Lucie Debray, an officer in Baron Danglars' banking establishment, who was collaborating with her to manipulate stocks and bonds so that they can accumulate large sums of money. When their scheme is over, because Danglars is on the verge of bankruptcy, young Lucien divides the money and then drops Madame Danglars as his mistress. Madame Danglars also figures prominently in another aspect of the plot. Earlier, she had an affair with Monsieur Villefort, the Count's archenemy, and she retired to Villefort's wife's family estate to have their child in secrecy. The estate is later purchased by the Count of Monte Cristo, and her son, whom she thought to be dead, is paid by the Count of Monte Cristo to pretend to be the wealthy Prince Cavalcanti. As such, her illegitimate son becomes engaged to her own legitimate daughter, Eugenie. Eugenie Danglars was the daughter who is first engaged to Albert de Morcerf, and then, in another arranged marriage, to the bogus Prince Cavalcanti, alias of the criminal Vendetta, who is actually her mother's illegitimate son. She abhors the idea of marriage and bondage and wants to live as a liberated woman, in charge of her own destiny. When her fiancé is exposed as a fraud and a murderer, she and the girl friend escape. They hope to reach Rome by a circuitous route, and her disappearance is one of the final blows to the pride of her villainous father.